still remember the day we made our greatest mistake. My name is Vexor Tann, and I served as strategic coordinator for the Kaltharian Hegemony's Outer Rim Command. For 300 cycles, our empire had expanded without significant resistance. We absorbed worlds, integrated species, and maintained order through superior technology and overwhelming force. It was efficient. It was predictable. It was safe. Until we encountered Earth. The initial contact reports described them as unremarkable.
Bipedal mammals.
Short lifespans. Fractured into competing nations despite occupying a single planet, they had barely achieved faster than light travel, and their weapons technology lagged behind ours by at least 4 generations. The High Council debated for exactly 12 minutes before deciding to incorporate them into the hegemony as a client species. The humans would provide labor and resources. In exchange, we would grant them protection and access to certain technologies. Standard procedure. We had done this successfully with 47 other species. There was no reason to expect anything different. Commander Zalex, my immediate superior, assigned me to oversee the integration process. This should be straightforward, Tann, he told me, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence as he reviewed the data tablets. Humans appear cooperative. Their leadership understands the benefits of compliance. Equip their security forces with surplus equipment from the Vex campaigns. Let them maintain internal order while we establish mining operations on their outer colonies. I accepted the assignment without hesitation. I should have asked more questions. The surplus equipment we provided was indeed outdated. Plasma rifles that were standard issue 30 cycles ago, hauled body armor that would stop projectiles but struggled against modern directed energy weapons. Transport vehicles that were slow by current standards but still faster than anything humans had built themselves. We gave them enough to feel empowered, but not enough to threaten us, or so we calculated. The first human commander I met was named Marcus Reeves. He was tall for his species, with graying hair at his temples and eyes that seemed to absorb information without revealing his thoughts. He accepted the weapons shipment with what appeared to be genuine gratitude. "This is generous of the hegemony," he said, running his hand along one of the plasma rifles. "We will put these to good use maintaining order in the outer settlements." I noticed he didn't specify what kind of order. For the first 6 months, everything proceeded according to plan. Human work crews extracted minerals from their asteroid belt. We established a regional headquarters on their 4th planet. Trade routes opened. Production quotas were met. The humans seemed content with their new position in the galactic community. Then the attacks began. Small at first. A supply convoy ambushed on the route between Earth and Mars. Always, the attackers used hit-and-run tactics, striking from the darkness of space before vanishing into the debris fields. We lost 3 transport ships before we could respond. When we sent a patrol to investigate, they found nothing. No bases, no signatures, just empty space and silent rocks. Probably pirates taking advantage of the transition period, Zalex suggested during our briefing. Increase patrols. Deploy sensor nets. This is a minor inconvenience. But the attacks escalated. A listening post on one of Jupiter's moons went offline. When we sent a team to investigate, they found the entire facility destroyed. Not damaged. Destroyed. Walls blown inward. Equipment melted beyond recognition. And most disturbing, every member of the garrison dead, killed by plasma weapons. Our plasma weapons. The weapons we had given to the humans? I contacted Marcus Reeves immediately. His face appeared on my communication screen. Expression neutral. "Commander Reeves, we have a situation. Several of our facilities have been attacked using equipment that matches the specifications of weapons provided to your security forces. I need an explanation." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled.
Ambassador Tann.
"I assure you that all weapons issued to official Earth Defense Forces remain accounted for. However, I cannot speak for equipment that may have been stolen by insurgent groups opposed to our alliance with the hegemony." "Insurgent groups?" I felt my throat sacs inflate with irritation. "Your reports indicated full compliance with integration protocols." "Compliance is never universal, Ambassador. Surely the hegemony has encountered resistance movements before." He was right, of course. Every integration faced some opposition. But this felt different. The attacks were too coordinated, too precise. The insurgents seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect while minimizing their own exposure. I authorized additional security measures. We deployed advanced sensor grids throughout the inner system. We increased patrol frequency. We established rapid response teams at key locations. For a few weeks the attack stopped. I allowed myself to believe we had solved the problem. I was wrong. The attack on Station Meridian shattered that illusion. Meridian was our primary logistics hub, a massive orbital platform positioned at one of Earth's Lagrange points. It housed 3,000 personnel and contained enough supplies to support operations across the entire sector. It was also protected by state-of-the-art defense systems and a permanent garrison of 200 combat troops. The attack lasted 17 minutes. The insurgents came in fast, using small craft that barely registered on our sensors. They had modified human civilian vessels, stripping them down for speed and maneuverability. Before our defense grid could lock on, they were already inside our perimeter. They struck the shield generators first, using our own plasma weapons with devastating accuracy. Once the shields fell, they targeted the weapons arrays. And then they did something unexpected. They boarded us. Kaltharian doctrine emphasized standoff warfare. We destroyed threats from a distance using superior firepower. We did not engage in close quarters combat if we could avoid it. Our soldiers were trained for ship-to-ship battles and planetary bombardment, not corridor fighting. Miosurdo, Sarathek, Moder, Dizenardo. The humans had no such reservations. They moved through Meridian like ghosts, small teams, 4 or 5 individuals. They used the station's own layout against us, turning corners into killing zones and intersections into death traps. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like hunters. I watched the security footage afterward. I still see it when I close my eyes. The humans moved with purpose but not recklessness. They communicated with hand signals and brief verbal cues. They used grenades to flush targets from cover, then cut them down with precise bursts of plasma fire. They took calculated risks that our tactical algorithms would have flagged as suicidal, yet somehow they survived. One clip showed a human female, no taller than my secondary arms, facing down 3 of our soldiers in a cargo bay. She was outnumbered and outgunned. Our tactical assessment gave her a 4% chance of survival. She killed all 3 of them in less than 30 seconds. She used the cargo containers for cover, fired from unexpected angles, and exploited the half-second delay in our soldiers' reaction times. When backup arrived, she was gone, vanished into the ventilation system like smoke. By the time our reinforcements secured the station, the insurgents had destroyed our primary computer core, stolen 6 cargo ships full of military equipment, and disappeared back into the darkness. They left behind 43 of our dead, and a message painted on the station's command center wall in luminescent paint. Thanks for the upgrades. The mockery stung worse than the casualties. Zalex convened an emergency session. His scales had paled from stress, and his voice carried an edge I had never heard before. This is unacceptable. These primitives are making fools of us. I want recommendations. Now. The military advisors suggested overwhelming force, deploy the fleet, blockade Earth, cut off their supply lines and starve them into submission. It was brutal but effective. We had used similar tactics before. But I had been studying the humans. I had been watching their history, their conflicts, their evolution as a species, and I had reached a terrifying conclusion. Commander, I believe that would be a mistake. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Seraph's mandibles clicked in irritation. Explain yourself, Tanner. I activated the holographic display and brought up human military history. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. They have developed warfare into a science and an art. They understand tactics, strategy, logistics, and improvisation at a level we have never needed to develop because we have always relied on technological superiority. I cycled through images, ancient battles with primitive weapons, industrial wars with millions of casualties, nuclear standoffs that threatened to destroy their entire planet. They know how to fight when outnumbered. They know how to fight when outgunned. They know how to turn weaknesses into strengths and use their enemies' advantages against them. Zalex waved a dismissive hand. They are using our own weapons against us. Once we cut off their supply, they will be powerless. Will they? I pulled up technical analysis of the captured ships from the Meridian attack. These vessels were modified using human engineering principles, not ours. They stripped out everything known essential and optimized for speed and stealth. They made our sensor technology less effective through simple, elegant design choices that our own engineers never considered because they prioritized other factors. They would see doubt creeping into the faces around me.
Did
They needed to understand what we were facing. The weapons we gave them are 4 generations old by our standards, I continued. But humans have been reverse engineering them. Look at these plasma signatures from the Meridian attack. The energy distribution is more efficient than our current models. They have been improving our technology. Silence filled the command center. Finally, one of the junior analysts spoke up. How is that possible? They barely understand the principles behind plasma containment. They understand warfare, I said quietly. And they understand that weapons are tools. They have taken our tools and made them better. Because that is what humans do. They adapt. They innovate. They refuse to accept limitations. Zalek stood abruptly. Enough. We are the Kaltharian Hegemony. We have conquered 47 worlds. We will not be intimidated by a species that was playing with chemical rockets a single generation ago. He turned to the fleet coordinator. Prepare for orbital blockade. I want every human ship grounded within the week. Cut off their trade. Restrict their movement. Show them the price of defiance. I wanted to argue further, but I held my tongue. Sarah-Lex had made his decision. I could only hope it wouldn't prove as disastrous as I feared. The blockade began 3 days later. We positioned ships at every major transit point in the system. Nothing moved without our permission. Human vessels were forced to dock at designated checkpoints. Any ship that refused to comply would be destroyed. For the first week, it seemed to work. Human merchant traffic ground to a halt. Their economy began to contract. Food shipments to outer colonies slowed to a trickle. Pressure mounted on the human leadership to negotiate. But the insurgent attacks didn't stop. They increased. Somehow, despite our blockade, despite our sensors, despite our overwhelming presence throughout the system, the humans continued to strike. They hit fuel depots on Saturn's moons. They sabotaged mining operations in the asteroid belt. They even managed to plant explosives on one of our cruisers while it was docked for maintenance. The ship survived, but barely. We couldn't understand how they were moving. Our sensors should have detected any ship large enough to carry troops and equipment. We had eyes everywhere, yet the humans moved like ghosts, appearing where they wanted, when they wanted, and vanishing before we could respond. I spent sleepless cycles reviewing data, searching for patterns, and then I found something that made my blood run cold. They weren't using ships. Not conventional ones anyway. The humans had reverted to older technology.
He's named Emil.
Chemical propulsion. Cold launches that didn't produce the energy signatures. Our sensors were calibrated to detect. They were using projectile-based weapons for initial attacks to avoid plasma signatures. They were shielding their forces in ways that made them nearly invisible to our detection grid. They had studied our technology and identified its weaknesses. Then they had deliberately chosen to use inferior technology because in this specific context inferior was actually superior. I presented my findings to Zalex. He listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. They are making us look like fools, he said finally. The High Council is demanding results. Other species are watching. If we cannot control one backward planet, what does that say about the hegemony? It says we underestimated them, I replied. And we continue to underestimate them. Commander, we need to reconsider our approach. No. His voice was flat.
Final.
We need to show strength. Prepare a demonstration strike. Select a human settlement. Something large enough to send a message but not so critical that it cripples their infrastructure. I want them to understand the consequences of continued resistance. My throat sacs constricted. Commander, that will only make things worse. That is not your decision to make, Ambassador Tann. You are relieved of this assignment. Report to administrative duties. I will handle the human problem myself. I left the command center feeling as though I was walking toward an abyss. Zalex didn't understand. He thought this was a simple matter of asserting dominance. He thought humans would break like every other species when faced with overwhelming force. But humans had been breaking each other for thousands of years. They knew how to endure. They knew how to survive. And most terrifyingly, they knew how to hate. The demonstration strike was scheduled for 72 hours later. Target New Phoenix, a settlement on Mars with a population of 50,000. It was large enough to be noticed but isolated enough that collateral damage would be limited. Zalex would demand surrender. When the humans refused, he would destroy the settlement from orbit. A clean, decisive message. Except nothing about humans was clean or decisive. I spent those 72 hours in my quarters, reviewing everything I knew about human history and behavior. I wasn't looking for military intelligence anymore. I was looking for understanding. What made these creatures so different? Why couldn't we predict their actions? And then I found it. A quote from one of their ancient military philosophers, a man named Sun Tzu, who had lived thousands of years before humans reached the stars. All warfare is based on deception. The humans hadn't been trying to win a conventional conflict. They had been deceiving us from the start, making us believe they were weaker than they actually were, accepting our outdated weapons with gratitude while planning how to use them against us, playing the role of compliant subjects while organizing resistance. They had given us exactly what we expected to see, and we had fallen for it completely. I activated my personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to Marcus Reeves. I didn't know if he would receive it. I didn't know if he would respond, but I had to try. Commander Reeves, this is Ambassador Vexor Tann. In 72 hours, the Hegemony will strike New Phoenix. Evacuate if you can, but know this, Military Commander Zalex believes this will break your resistance. He is wrong. I have studied your species. I understand now what we are facing. This will not end the way he thinks. Please find another path. The cost is too high. I didn't expect a response. I certainly didn't expect what happened next. 18 hours before the scheduled strike, every human settlement went dark. No communications, no energy signatures, no movement. It was as if the entire species had simply vanished. Zalex ordered immediate reconnaissance. Our scouts reported empty cities, abandoned facilities, equipment left running but no people anywhere. 50 million humans had disappeared. Where are they? Zalex demanded, his voice rising with each word. They cannot hide an entire population. Find them. We searched for 6 hours. We found nothing. The humans had gone to ground, and we had no idea where. And then as the deadline for the strike approached, my communicator chimed, a message from Marcus Reeves. Just 3 words. Now you see. I understood then. This wasn't about New Phoenix. This was about control. Saralax wanted to strike a settlement to demonstrate power, but there was no settlement to strike. The humans had removed the target. They had taken away our ability to inflict the consequences we had threatened. They had made us look impotent. Zalex canceled the strike. What choice did he have? He couldn't destroy an empty city and claim victory, but the damage was done. Word spread throughout the hegemony, whilst the humans had defied us and suffered no consequences. Other client species began to whisper. They began to wonder, and the attacks continued. The situation deteriorated faster than anyone in the High Council anticipated. 3 weeks after the failed strike on New Phoenix, human resistance forces hit 6 hegemony facilities simultaneously across 3 different star systems, not just in the Sol system anymore. They had somehow acquired functional faster-than-light capability, and were now operating throughout our territory. The attacks followed the same pattern. Swift, brutal, and precisely targeted to cause maximum disruption, with minimum exposure. But it was what happened on Draxxis Prime that changed everything. Draxxis Prime was a core world, home to 70 billion Kaltharians and the site of our most advanced weapons manufacturing facilities. It was protected by a fleet of 30 warships and a planetary defense grid that could theoretically withstand an assault by 100 enemy vessels. The humans sent 4 people. 4. I only learned the details later, after military intelligence had pieced together what happened. The 4 operatives had stowed away on a civilian transport, hidden inside cargo containers for the 3-week journey. They survived in those cramped spaces with minimal supplies, no communication, and nothing but patience. Once planetside, they moved through the capital city like ordinary traders. They purchased supplies. They visited tourist sites. They even stopped at local restaurants. For 2 weeks, they did nothing suspicious, nothing that would trigger security alerts. They were studying us, learning our patterns, identifying weaknesses. When they finally acted, it took them 6 hours to infiltrate the main weapons facility, plant explosive charges at critical junctures throughout the complex, and escape. The charges detonated during shift change, when the facility was at minimum staffing. Casualties were relatively light, only 84 dead, but the facility itself was completely destroyed, along with schematics for 3 generations of weapon systems, prototype-directed energy platforms, and enough raw materials to build a small fleet. The economic damage ran into billions of credits. The strategic loss was incalculable. But worse than any of that was the psychological impact. If 4 humans could penetrate our most secure facility on a core world, what else could they do? Where else might they be hiding? How many more were already embedded in our systems, waiting for orders? Paranoia spread through the hegemony like a virus. Security protocols were revised daily. Random inspections became routine. Trust eroded between divisions, as everyone suspected infiltration. We started fighting shadows, dedicating enormous resources to threats that might not even exist. The humans had turned our own size against us. Our vast empire, once our greatest strength, had become a liability. We had too much territory to defend, too many facilities to secure, too many possible targets. And we still didn't know where the main human population was hiding. Alex convened another emergency session. He looked like he had aged 10 cycles in the past month. His scales had lost their luster, and his movements lacked their usual precision. The stress was destroying him. "We need solutions," he said without preamble. "The High Council has given us one more cycle to resolve this situation. If we cannot demonstrate progress, they will remove me from command and potentially authorize total eradication protocols for Earth and all human colonies." Total eradication. Complete genocide of an entire species. It was the ultimate sanction used only twice in hegemony history against species deemed irredeemably hostile. I felt my stomach turn. "Commander, that would be a catastrophic mistake. You were removed from this assignment, Tann." His voice was cold. "You have no authority here." "Then I speak as someone who has studied them longer than anyone else in this room." I stood, meeting his gaze directly. "If you attempt total eradication, you will not eliminate the threat. You will create something far worse. Humans do not break under pressure. They harden, they adapt, they remember. Kill 99% of them, and the remaining 1% will dedicate their existence to destroying us. They will become the very nightmare we fear." One of the military advisors spoke up. "They are one species. We are an empire of 48 worlds. How could they possibly threaten us?" I pulled up historical data on the display. "Because they have already fought wars like this. Among themselves. Look at this conflict they called World War II. One nation attempted to conquer their entire planet. It took 6 years and cost 50 million human lives. But they stopped it. They united against a common threat and refused to surrender even when their cities were burning. That was when they were still using chemical explosives and projectile weapons. Imagine what they could do with modern technology, and a justified grievance." The room fell silent. I could see calculation in their eyes, fear mixing with pragmatism. Alex spoke slowly. "Then what do you recommend, Ambassador?"
Holes.
"We cannot appear weak.
Gay.
We cannot allow them to continue these attacks.
Hand.
We cannot negotiate from a position of disadvantage. Then we need to change the position we are negotiating from." I said, "We need to stop treating this as a military problem and start treating it as a diplomatic one." We gave them the chance for peaceful integration. They chose violence. Did they? I pulled up communication records. Look at the timeline. The first attacks began 2 weeks after we established mining quotas that required human workers to relocate from their home colonies. Families were separated. Communities were disrupted. We made decisions about their lives without consulting them, because we saw them as resources rather than partners. I changed the display to show casualty reports. And look at their targets. They have been striking military and industrial facilities. They have minimized civilian casualties even when it would have been easier to cause maximum destruction. They could have hit population centers. They could have poisoned water supplies. They could have deployed biological weapons. They have the knowledge and the capability, but they have not done any of those things. What is your point, Tann? My point is that they are not trying to exterminate us. They are trying to force us to recognize them as equals. Every attack is a message. You cannot control us through force. You must deal with us as partners, or not at all. Alex considered this. I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. Pride warring with pragmatism. Fear competing with necessity. Finally, he spoke. "Contact Marcus Reeves. Arrange a meeting. But Tann, if this is another deception, if they use this opportunity to strike at us again, I will hold you personally responsible." I accepted the risk, because the alternative was extinction for one side or the other. It took 3 days to establish secure communication protocols that both sides would accept. The meeting location was neutral territory, an abandoned trading station in the Outer Rim, far from both Earth and Kaltharian core worlds. Each side would bring 5 representatives, no weapons, No backup forces within scanner range. I led the Kaltharian delegation. Saralak stayed behind, unwilling to risk himself but giving me full authority to negotiate. It was the first sign that he understood how desperate our situation had become. Marcus Reeves led the human delegation. With him were 4 others. A woman named Elena Vasquez, who I learned was a military strategist, a man named James Park who served as their chief engineer, an older woman named Margaret Stone who represented their civilian government, and a younger man named David Kim who said nothing but watched everything with unsettling intensity. We met in the station's conference room, sitting across from each other at a table designed for species now extinct. The irony was not lost on me. Marcus spoke first.
Ambassador Tann.
Thank you for arranging this meeting. I understand it took considerable courage on your part. Courage or desperation? I replied. Perhaps both. Commander Reeves, I will be direct. The High Council is prepared to authorize total eradication protocols if we cannot reach an agreement. They view your resistance as an existential threat to the hegemony. Margaret Stone leaned forward. And we view your occupation as an existential threat to humanity. So we find ourselves at an impasse. Not necessarily. I activated a data pad and slid it across the table. I have studied your species extensively, your history, your culture, your patterns of behavior. I believe I understand what you want. Elena Vasquez picked up the pad and reviewed its contents. Her eyebrows rose slightly. This is a complete restructuring of the integration treaty. Yes, equal partnership rather than client status. Representation on the regional council. Control over your own resource extraction and distribution. Freedom of movement throughout hegemony space. Mutual defense agreements rather than enforced protection. It is everything you should have been offered from the beginning. James Park looked skeptical. Why would the hegemony agree to this? You have never offered these terms to any other species. Because no other species has demonstrated that they could destroy us, if we force them to. I said bluntly. You have fought this war on your terms, not ours. You have made our technology irrelevant by refusing to engage on our level. You have shown that our advantages mean nothing against an opponent who will not play by our rules. The cost of forcing compliance exceeds any benefit we could gain. David Kim spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet but carried weight. You fear us. I met his gaze. Yes, I fear you, not because you are powerful, but because you are adaptable. We Kaltharians have relied on technological superiority for so long that we forgot how to fight any other way. You have reminded us that warfare is not about having the best weapons. It is about having the will to use whatever you have most effectively. Marcus leaned back in his chair. And if we agree to this partnership, if we cease hostilities, how do we know the hegemony will honor these terms? You do not, I admitted. Trust must be earned. But consider this, continuing this conflict benefits neither side. You have proven you can bleed us, but we can still destroy your homeworld if we commit to total war. Neither outcome serves anyone's interests, whereas cooperation gives both our species something we need, which is, for us, security. The knowledge that we do not have to constantly watch our backs for human saboteurs. For you, access to galactic civilization, technology, knowledge, resources from 1,000 worlds. The chance to take your place among the stars as partners rather than subjects. Margaret Stone spoke again. There is one more thing we require. Accountability. Your forces killed 17,000 humans during the initial occupation. Families were separated, communities were destroyed. People disappeared into your detention facilities. That cannot simply be forgotten. I had anticipated this. I propose a truth and reconciliation process. Independent investigation into all alleged abuses, compensation for verified losses, return of any remaining detainees, and a formal apology from the High Council acknowledging our errors in judgment. Will the High Council agree to that? They will if I present it as the only alternative to a war they cannot win. I paused. Holth. But I need something from you as well. Hol. The location of your hidden population centers, and assurance that there are no more active operatives waiting to strike. The humans exchanged glances. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Finally, Marcus nodded. We can agree to that. But the operatives stand down only after the treaty is ratified and the first accountability measures are implemented. Insurance against betrayal. Fair enough. We spent the next 6 hours hammering out details. It was exhausting work. complicated by the fundamental differences in how our species thought about authority, obligation, and trust. But slowly, painfully, we built a framework that both sides could accept. As the meeting concluded, Elena Vasquez asked me a question that had clearly been on her mind. Ambassador Tann, why are you doing this? You could have supported the hardliners, pushed for eradication, protected your career. Instead, you risked everything to negotiate with us. Why? I considered my answer carefully. Because I saw what you were, not what we wanted you to be, but what you actually are. And I realized that species like yours do not come along often. You are frustrating, unpredictable, dangerous, but you are also innovative, creative, resilient. The galaxy needs that. The hegemony needs that, even if we are too proud to admit it. David Kim smiled slightly. You think we can make you better? Well, I think you already have.
Oh.
You forced us to question assumptions we have held for centuries.
Hey.
You made us realize that our way is not the only way, that is valuable beyond measure, even if it came at a terrible cost. The treaty took another 2 months to finalize. The High Council resisted. Many wanted to reject the terms and continue the conflict, but I presented them with detailed analysis of every engagement. I showed them the casualty projections, the economic costs, the strategic impossibilities of fighting an enemy who refused to be where you expected them. And I showed them something else. Intercepted communications from other client species. Whispers of hope, of resistance, of inspiration drawn from humanity's example. The humans had not just challenged the hegemony, they had planted seeds of doubt throughout our empire. If we destroyed Earth, we would confirm everything the dissidents believed. We would show that the hegemony maintained order only through fear, and fear is a fragile foundation for an empire. But if we made peace, if we showed that we could adapt, that we could negotiate with those who opposed us, then we demonstrated strength of a different kind. The vote was close, but the treaty passed. On the day of the signing, I stood beside Marcus Reeves on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station orbiting Earth. Below us, the blue and white planet turned slowly in the void. It looked peaceful, beautiful. Nothing about it suggested the chaos and violence of the past year. Your world is lovely, I said. I understand now why you fought so hard for it. It is not just the world, Marcus replied. It is what it represents: home, self-determination, the right to make our own mistakes and learn from them. No one should have to surrender those things. No, I agreed, they should not.
I apologize that it took us so long to understand that.
You understand it now. That is what matters. He turned to face me. What happens next, Ambassador? This treaty is just words on paper. Making it real will be hard work. The hardest work, I confirmed. There will be resistance on both sides. Incidents, misunderstandings, perhaps even violence. Building trust after betrayal is slow and painful. But possible? I believe so, Al said. If both sides commit to it.
I gestured toward the planet below.
Your people have shown remarkable capability for adaptation, for survival, for turning disadvantages into advantages. Those same qualities will serve you well in peace, perhaps better than they did in war. Marcus smiled. Perhaps, though I hope we never have to find out if we are as good at peace as we prove to be at war. The signing ceremony began an hour later. All representatives from 48 hegemony species gathered to witness humanity's transition from conquered subjects to equal partners. The documents were elaborate things, full of legal language and carefully negotiated clauses, but the essence was simple. The hegemony acknowledged human sovereignty. Humans accepted partnership within the galactic community. Both sides agreed to mutual defense and cooperation. Both sides committed to accountability for past actions. As I placed my seal on the final document, I felt something I had not experienced in cycles.
Hope.
Not the false optimism of assumed superiority, but genuine hope born from respect and understanding. The humans had taught us an expensive lesson. They had shown us that giving people outdated weapons and expecting them to accept subjugation, whole, was a fundamental misunderstanding of what weapons actually are. Whole. Weapons are not just tools of force, they are catalysts for change. In the right hands, with the right tactics, even obsolete technology can reshape empires. We gave the humans our cast-off equipment and assumed it would keep them controlled. Instead, they took those outdated plasma rifles and old transport ships and used them to tear apart our assumptions about power and control. They gave us something far more valuable in return, though it took me time to recognize it. They gave us truth. The uncomfortable, painful truth that might does not make right. That technological advancement does not equal moral superiority. That every species, no matter how primitive they seem, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. It was a lesson we should have learned long ago. Better to learn it from the humans than to face extinction because we refused to change. After the ceremony, I returned to my quarters and began composing my final report. Not for the High Council, but for the historical archives. Future generations needed to understand what happened here. They needed to know that the hegemony's greatest defeat became its greatest opportunity for growth. I titled the document simply, The Human Question. In it, I detailed everything. The mistakes we made. The assumptions that blinded us. The moment I realized we were not facing a primitive species but rather a sophisticated one that simply approached problems differently than we did. I wrote about the Meridian attack, about New Phoenix, about Draxxis Prime, but I also wrote about the treaty negotiations, about Margaret Stone's insistence on accountability, about David Kim's quiet observation that we feared them not because of what they could do to us but because of what they represented, the idea that our way was not the only way. I concluded with a warning and a hope. The warning, never again, should the hegemony assume that technological superiority translates to inevitable victory. Never again should we treat other species as resources rather than partners. Never again should we mistake compliance for peace. The hope that this new partnership with humanity would enrich us all, that by working together rather than enforcing dominance both species could achieve things neither could accomplish alone, that the diversity of thought and approach would make the hegemony stronger, not weaker. 3 months after the treaty signing, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a single item. A plasma rifle, one of the original weapons we had given to the humans, but it had been modified, enhanced, improved in ways our engineers had never considered. Attached was a note in Marcus Reeves' handwriting. Thank you for the tools. We made them better. Now let us see what we can build together. I placed the rifle in my office, where I could see it every day. A reminder, a warning, a promise. The humans had taken our outdated weapons and changed the galaxy. Now they were our partners, not our subjects, and I suspected that in the years to come, they would continue to change things in ways we could not yet imagine. We had feared their tactics, we had feared their adaptability, we had feared their refusal to accept limitations. Now standing on the other side of conflict, I felt something different. Anticipation. Because if they could do all of that with cast-off weapons and determination, what could they accomplish with full access to galactic resources and knowledge? What innovations would they bring? What problems would they solve in ways we never considered? The future suddenly seemed far more interesting than the past, and far more hopeful.